Hello and welcome, I'm Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet, and today is Warhammer Wednesday. So in today's video, I'm going to follow up on a topic we talked about before, where I talked about how the 5 things I think make Warhammer better in some ways than Magic. So it's time to go the other way. It's time to reverse it, in the famous words of some R&B artist. We're going to talk about the 5 ways I think Magic is better than Warhammer. I love both games. I did a previous video when getting into 40k about how certain things kind of jumped out to me as being better about Warhammer. Now, when I made that video, as you can see, here's the thumbnail here, there's a link to it in the description and the cards. People said it was like comparing apples to oranges. The idea of comparing apples to oranges is quite often not applied correctly, like 80% of the time. If I was talking about that I needed an apple to serve a role, for example I needed a green fruit to put up my arse, and then we start talking about oranges, then we are comparing apples to oranges, because oranges does not fulfill the role of a green fruit up my arse. However, if we were just talking about 2 juicy fruits, then yes, we can compare apples to oranges. In this case, I'm not talking about how Warhammer is a collectible trading card game, or Magic is a tabletop board game based around miniatures. I'm talking about them being hobbies that involve quite a high cost. They're luxury hobbies. They are bought from the same places. They're played in the same places, the same venues, stores, etc. They both have tournament scenes. They both have competitive scenes. They both have huge online presences. The Venn diagram of Warhammer to Magic players crosses over quite a bit. So in short, if you think it's apples to oranges, you're just being a shit. With that out of the way, let's talk about 5 ways that Magic the Gathering is better than Warhammer 40k. And if you have a horse in this race, if that horse is Warhammer, my previous video will explain the 5 things I think Warhammer does better. There'll be a link, like I said, in the description below and the cards, so go check out that accompanying sister video. Number 5 on my list of 5 things that Magic does better than Warhammer is rules. Wizards of the Coast has an incredible rules system, and the team that manages it deserves all the praise in the world. Prior to getting into Warhammer, I think I took for granted just how good the Magic the Gathering rules system and those that manage it are and do as a job. Rule systems are important for any game that looks to be marginally competitive, so that you can actually have a competitive scene with an even playing field where everyone can play by the rules. But even in a casual circumstance, like I'm talking not even FNM or GP level for Magic here, I'm talking like just playing with your mates, having a solid rule system stops arguments, it helps game flow, and just makes the whole gaming experience a little bit better. Since the release of 9th edition, just one small rule, the Lookout Saw rule, the rule which dictates how characters can be targeted, it has been FAQ'd, it has been errated twice, because it just didn't work as intended and was abusable. Now, this is a problem across all tabletop wargaming, from wargaming to tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons. There's an argument between rules as written and rules as intended. Raw versus Rye. Rules as written is the idea that we take every single rule in the rulebook or the character sheet or whatever, wherever it's described, and we play it as written, word for word, and that means that words need to have clear definitions. Rules as intended is trying to play the rules or interpret the rules as they were intended. That's kind of obvious, really, right? There might be a designer's note explaining what this rule was meant to emulate. It's getting the kind of the gist of what's going on. Now, from a Magic perspective, when I came into this, I'm like, rules as written is what we should use, right? Because in Magic, there is no leeway. There is no what was intended by the rules. It's just that those are how the rules work, because they're very well written. They are comprehensive. They are complicated. If you were to read through the entirety of the Magic rules document, it's a fucking lot, but they work. They are functional. They do what they should do. The problem with the Warhammer and other tabletop games too, you can see this in D&D and other war games I'm sure, although I don't have examples from those, is that, well, if you don't have clear terminology, if you don't know the definition of certain proper nouns, the word reinforcements, for example, or as a discussion on my Discord recently, the word attacks or fights, or what those things like finite definitively mean, then rules as written starts to fall apart because you don't have the language to decode what the rules actually do. Furthermore, if you don't have an editor, if you don't have a copywriter making sure these things, work, then you get confusing rules messes, like for example, the Necron's reanimation protocols took me 5, maybe 6 read-throughs and a discussion with a friend before I kind of got where we were going with it, because it is just structured in a way that is not intuitive and doesn't make sense on first, second, or even third passing. Then you get circumstances like at the moment where the Blood Angels have a sanguinary priest. He holds a cup and he lets your soldiers drink from it, one soldier within 6 inches every turn, to make him angry, to put them into the assault doctrine, the fist fighty doctrine. Now, in the fist fighty doctrine, Blood Angels should get +1 attack and +1 AP, but the chalice on the character sheet mentions when they attack, where the +1 attack in the character-wide army rules mention when they fight, and to me, I'm seeing a rules as intended, like they drink from the cup and they get into the fighty mode, versus a rules as written, where attacking and fighting are defined quite differently. If you look at it, means that this chalice doesn't actually trigger the extra attack, and therefore this HQ character for the Blood Angels doesn't do the thing that Blood Angels want to do. It might be intended. It might be a balancing thing that actually gives them that extra attack early on they think is too good. I doubt it, but yeah, it looks like, at face value, someone has written attacks in one bit, fights in another, and they haven't talked to each other. An editor hasn't checked all the terminology. There isn't a styles sheet to make sure you are writing in the same format. It's just a fucking mess. And this kind of thing leads to people having arguments over how the rules work. Warhammer is hugely complicated, massively so, and then when the rules can be interpreted differently by 2 different people, well, yeah, it causes a breakdown and it's a problem. And because of this, we are seeing regular index editions and FAQs being released to update and improve the wording, clarify things, or sometimes balance things. Magic, on the other hand, really doesn't have this problem. Yes, there are cards like Turn and Burn and Felidar the cat, which went infinite with itself, and they need a day 1 errata because something was missed in copyright. But that is bound to happen. There are going to be mistakes anywhere. All human beings are fallible, they can all make mistakes, so there will be the occasional mistake, but Magic has like 1,000 game pieces printed every fucking year, so a couple of things slipping through the editorial team or the final checks, it's gonna happen. The great thing is they get day 1 errated and then they just fucking work. Magic is complicated, arguably less complicated than Warhammer, but it works. There's a stack, there is layers, there's a comprehensive rules document that tells you that things cannot be misinterpreted. Things just work the way they do, and that should work across Arena, MTGO, and Paper Magic all the same. A small anecdote here is that when talking about the Raw versus Rye discussion with Warhammer with my local game store, I feel people who are less entrenched in Magic thought that Magic had the same problem, and I had to inform them that no, judges know the comprehensive rules, and there are definitive things that happen when you cast spells and target certain things, and certain interactions happen. Some things aren't intuitive, like mutate and how it functions with flicker or reanimation effects isn't intuitive, but once you know the hard and fast rules, the set rules, it's almost like a computer program. Like it can play out and it will function exactly how as it should. With Warhammer, on the other hand, things are written so unclearly at times, there's interpretation to be had. I was listening to a podcast recently where they talked about how there's a Black Legion stratagem that has an extra line written at the end of it, which was designed for 8th and now in 9th. It doesn't make any sense, and you have to get a ruling from the TO on how that rule works before you enter the tournament. And that's something that doesn't really happen with Magic. And this is probably why Magic has had such a good tournament scene and organised play scene in spite of Wizards' attempts to dismantle such a thing, because the rules just work. It is an even playing field as you go into an event and play with your cards. And this naturally brings me to number 4, the intuitive face value of your game pieces. In Magic the Gathering, once you know the rules and the keywords, every card does exactly, well, 95% of them do, exactly what they say on the tin at the time. There are a few differences with this. There are cards that have been errated and don't function like they used to. Sylvan Library being a good example of no longer being an activated ability and just being a trigger. And there's, of course, textless cards, which I personally love, but they do serve to slightly dismantle this idea. Like Cryptic Command has 4 different modes and you pick 2. Yeah, okay, that's a bad example of this. RTFC, this means read the fucking card, which means if you read the fucking card, once you understand the schema of how Magic the Gathering works, a card can be read and understood what it will do in the confines of Magic. An opponent plays an obscure Mirrodin common against you that you've never seen. You can read it, and if your understanding of the Magic rules is enough, you will pass it and understand what it does immediately, or at least face value what it does in a vacuum, perhaps. In Warhammer, your opponent puts down a model that you've never seen before. You have to now ask its name, because that's not there, which is, I mean, this is just a natural byproduct of miniatures, so this isn't a value judgment as such, it's just an obvious way that Magic is better than Warhammer. You have to know its name, and then knowing its name, I guess you can Google it, but you don't know what faction it is, what its rules do, what book its rules are found in. Then you might find out its name, what book it's in, you look it up, and then the rules for it have changed because it's been indexed or updated. And I keep mentioning about them updating stuff. I personally believe it is a necessary evil. Warhammer and Games Workshop controlling Warhammer by updating stuff like weapons sheets and wound totals and stuff as new things come out to make them comparable is great. It just has an unfortunate byproduct of making things really fucking confusing. Let's say this model you've never seen that your opponent's told you what it's called and you've looked it up as in, I don't know, Codex Space Marines. For some reason you've never read Codex Space Marines and you realise there's a stratagem you can use for it. Let's say, I don't know, I've got out of my head, Duty Eternal. You can halve the damage incoming to a Dreadnought? That's amazing! Turns out it was busted as fuck, and now it only reduces the incoming damage per attack per shot from another gun by 1. It's been errated. And your opponent is then trying to use the previous one, the previous version of it, and you have to be the one to let them down and say, no, it's been errated because it was too good before. Again, the fact that they updated it, the fact that they changed it is fantastic. That's really good. It's balancing your game to allow it to be played at a competitive level, or even making non-competitive games just a bit more fair. Problem is, it leads to, like I said, an unfortunate byproduct of things being layer upon layer of weird shit. And then Duty Eternal itself being called the same thing but doing a different thing, and then Duty Eternal is now stopped being a stratagem and is now a rule just inherent to all Dreadnoughts. But then you have other things. Upon Wings of Fire, it used to give you like extra distance on charging with jetpack units for Blood Angels. It now like allows you to ignore debuffs and get +1 to shoot and wound when you dropped in. I mean, it's thematically similar, they're linked, but they have the same fucking name but do a different thing. Can you imagine if between, I don't know, core sets flying function differently each time? It would be fucking wild. And the thing is, these sort of patching, this sort of updating and changing of stuff, in World of Warcraft or League of Legends, when a spell is changed, it is matter of fact factually dealt with by a computer. So when you play against an opponent, let's say Volibear was changed dramatically in a way that I didn't like so much. I still like new Volibear, but I preferred old Volibear. Like, his Q, Rolling Thunder, I think it's called, is the same fucking name, but completely... quite a significantly different spell, okay? But the computer does that for you. In tabletop, if a thing is called the same thing but does two different things, I will say it, your opponent may disagree or misremember it, or remember the old versions, you've got all this confusion, we're all fallible, and now you're having a conversation about it, you've got to look for your Codex Space Marines, check Battlescribe, check the Battlescribe is updated, see if Warhampedia has been updated. You might find two conflicting entries, because one of these is updated and one hasn't been, and then the official Games Workshop app is fucking garbage anyways, I wouldn't trust that shit. Whew. Like I said, the updates are necessary, I think they're good, I think it makes the game better. But it does cause this excess baggage, which Magic doesn't really have. There are some examples of it. There are things like Companion no longer working like it says on the card. It has been changed to balance Companion. But that is quite the rarity. And there are some erratas, but you just look it up on Gatherer and there, that's it. You got it. You know what it does. Number 3, accessibility. Okay, so I've said this before a few times, that Magic is at its best when you get to play Commander, or Historic, or Modern, or Legacy. And the formats with huge card pools and tons of interactions and a variety of playstyles. But the matter of the fact is, if you want to play Magic, especially for your first game ever, if you want to get into Magic, it's very easy. The intro packs are provided for free by game stores. They're given to Wizards to give out, and the game stores should be giving them out for free, so you can pick up an intro little startup deck thing and play with your friend. And all you need for Magic is one of those intro decks, a small flat play space, and that's it. I mean, dice and paper helps with tracking life totals, but even then you can track that in your head. How many times have you played a quick game of, like, I don't know, booster pack wars or whatever, a GP, and just kept the life totals in your head, or practice round before an event and kept the life totals in your head? It can be done. Warhammer, on the other hand, requires you to have a collection of models for each of you. It doesn't have to be an army list per se. We're trying to think of the most basic casual level here. So I've got a few models, you've got a few models. Those models don't just come out of a packet and are playable. They have to be cut off their sprues. If they're push fit, they can push fit together. Others have to be glued. And then, well, let's just ignore painting for the moment, but painting is another thing. Then you need a space to play on. Let's say the same space you need for the intro pack game of Magic. You then need some things to show terrain, especially if you're playing 40k. Terrain is quite important, so I don't know, some random objects from around you, sure. Then dice, and then rulers. And at that point, kind of from my following points before, you don't really know what your fucking units do. You need codices, you need character sheets, you need info, you need the rules. Of course you need the rules for Magic too, but the cards each themselves are a self-contained game piece that tells you how it interacts with the rules, where the models don't do that. It's not like HeroClix where you have numbers on their bases and stuff. You need sheets from books or a website. And I want to reiterate, neither of these things are peak Magic or peak Warhammer. But they are the basics. They are your first introductory game to learn the ropes. And beyond that, there is some more nuance here too. The idea that building and painting is a hurdle to play the game, it's true if your only focus is to play the game, but the building and painting itself is its own hobby. I talk about that in the other video. I don't know how that is an extra hobby on top. It's like added value depending on what you want out of your hobby. And then, of course, there is the idea that you can play on Arena or MTGO. Magic, to play it, doesn't even need 2 people anymore. You can install Arena, which is free to play, and I will teach you the fundamentals through a tutorial. Gone are the days of needing anyone to teach you, a teacher. You don't need someone to tell you what flying is, and you don't need someone to laugh at you when you try to tap a Llanowar elves to go fetch up a forest. I don't make Magic content simply because it's the greatest game in the world. I also do it because I love going to stores and events and playing Magic with the physical cards and talking to my opponent and talking to other nerds about nerdy shit, right? So, again, I'm not saying that Arena or MTGO is peak Magic, but it does give you the accessibility to play Magic the Gathering at any time of the day, any format with Modo, especially with rental services and stuff as well. I can play such a variety of Magic, like in my pants, like middle of the night if I wanted to. Warhammer almost has literally nothing like this. Games Workshop do not want to expand into the digital space as much. They will hand out their license to people to make, I don't know, turn-based strategy hex games and Dawn of Wars and RTS and stuff like that, but they don't seem to want to have a digital version of Warhammer. And there's a few reasons for this. I mean, they claim to only be a model company that happens to make a rule system to go with their games. That said, they do charge us through the fucking nose for rulebooks, so that's kind of bollocks, really. But also, I guess if they're a model company, they might be scared that a rule system online that allows like the competitive scene to move to playing almost digitally completely might take away from the modelling and painting aspect of the game and lessen those sales. But again, that's kind of bollocks, because whilst modelling and painting isn't part of the hobby, the collectible side of Magic is booming, in spite of the fact that during global pandemics like this, Magic is primarily played in digital. All that said, Warhammer is booming too, when the only way to play it online right now is through Tabletop Simulator, which is a third-party app. I have been streaming Tabletop Simulator, and I love Tabletop Simulator for allowing me to play so much fucking Warhammer. Tons more than what I would have been able to do without it. A, because of the pandemic. And B, because I can play at any time of the night. If my wife goes to bed a bit early, I can try and get a game of 40k in with my patrons on my Discord. I'm even playing in a league on the Auspex Tactics Discord too, which is another YouTuber's Discord. I play regularly with my patrons. It's great. I love it. But it's a third-party app that you have to like build a table or have the community build your table. You have to pick up models which are assets that are, again, built by the community. You have no functionality to build army lists inside it, or has to be done by a third program, in this case Battle Scribe. And it emulates the experience of playing tabletop that giving you dice and measurers. That there's no rule implementation. And in some ways that's better, because you can do take backsies, you can go back and do things that you forgot or missed and all that sort of stuff. It feels like playing actual tabletop in many ways when teaching other people to play and stuff like that. But it's a third party thing. I would happily pay to play like, you know, a first party version of Warhammer if it looked nice. I can't, so Tabletop Sim is my option, and it's got a growing community around it as well. I'll try and put a link in the description below to the Tabletop Simulator Discord, so if you're looking to play some 40k on Tabletop Simulator, it'll be down there. But it's obvious that Arena is polished and refined, and even Modo is polished and refined compared to a third-party program, although only just. It's just funny that there's this booming, like, cultural monolith that is Warhammer and Warhammer 40k. They are fucking doing gangbusters. They are making money hand over fist, but there is no way to play outside of the physical game. I guess there's a small benefit to that, but I don't see much of an upside. That's definitely a thing that Magic does better than Warhammer. And then finally we come to the ironic one, number one, which was number one on my other list. This is spoilers for the other video too. It's the secondary market. I said in my Warhammer versus Magic video where I sided with Warhammer that the secondary market was a problem for Magic. At least in Warhammer, the models tend to be the price you pay for them, which can be a bit inflated from Games Workshop anyway. But there's no, like, a rare model that's popular in a tournament scene, like I don't know, like a Scalding Tarn would be, that costs you a fucking bomb because of availability. Everything is printed demand, everything is constantly being made, nothing gets to those values. However, the secondary market isn't all doom and gloom. I fucking hate the reserve list, and I hate what the secondary market and the reserve list does to like Legacy, for example, and Commander staples and things. But both hobbies are relatively expensive, right? This is a luxury hobby, both of these. To get a whole army of Warhammer will cost you several £100s. To get Legacy decks will cost you thousands of pounds. Like, it's a luxury hobby. There's no two ways about it. When you buy into Warhammer, if you were to try and sell this stuff on eBay, there will be a markdown unless you're really good at painting. I think I'm an okay to moderate painter. I think my stuff would sell for less than what I bought it for. However, if you buy Eternal staples and stuff like that with Magic, it's a good likelihood it goes up. I bought into Warhammer by selling a Legacy deck. I bought some Dual Lands, a Force of Wills Show and Tell. It's the Legacy deck Show and Tell. Omnis Show, to be more accurate. No, Sneak and Show. It had Sneak and Tact in it. And I sold most of those parts. I kept the Force, I kept the Vulcan stuff. I sold most of the parts for well over like £1,000. More than what I bought the parts for several years prior. And that allowed me to buy a shit ton of Warhammer. If we were looking at this the other way around, if I try to sell like an army in Warhammer, you can sell armies in Warhammer. Like, I've started to experience that people do like sell off armies they don't want anymore, or like modelling, crafting projects of armies to buy another army to go to the next army or whatever. But you're going to see depreciation in the value of that asset, where with Magic, if you're a bit wise to it and you're buying like Eternal staples, the cards just tend to go up. Now, of course, this isn't true for all Magic, and I'm talking like best case scenarios for a lot of this. I'm talking about the accessibility of Magic being better than Warhammer's, because the base game is so easy to get into with intro decks and minimal setup. But if you want to get into Legacy or Modern, your decks will cost you thousands of pounds. So that is a downside. I do go through a lot of that in the other video too. But my point I'm getting at, I guess, with the secondary market also being a positive as well as a negative, is that most hobbies, when you get into them, the things you buy or use in them will either be just like sunk costs, or they'll be like what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word? Oh, what is it? What's the fucking word when you use something up? I can't think of it, but like paints, for example. The paints are gone, okay? And when you like buy golf clubs or even fishing rods and shit, they don't like always... I assume there are some that will hold their value or go up in value if they're like collector's things, but when they get used, they become secondhand and they're worth less. Magic flip reverses that a little bit, unless you're playing paper standard. But that's a fucking money sink, and people probably shouldn't be doing that. So, there we have it. The 5 ways I think Magic the Gathering trumps. It's better than Warhammer in these 5 ways. It's not saying that Magic is definitively better, although it probably is my preferred game if I had to pick one for the rest of my life, but it's just 5 ways that Magic does better than Warhammer. Did I miss anything? Was there something you thought I was unfair about? Let me know in the comment section below. Which do you prefer? Of course, I am primarily a Magic the Gathering YouTuber, but Warhammer Wednesday has been relatively popular, that's why I'm going to keep doing it. Are you a Warhammer or a Magic stan? Tell me in the comment section below and tell me what reason it is that you prefer one to the other. I'd love to hear it, and it's also engagement, because it helps the channel. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. Smash that like button, ring that fucking bell, and think of me next time you're tickling your pink, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.